Hello, and welcome to episode 57 of Chorus Place. I'm so glad you've chosen to join me for today's conversation. In today's episode, I'll be talking about my opinion of the benefits and drawbacks of adjusting our clocks for daylight savings time and how it can affect sleep. As always, if you like what you hear, please leave a review and/or comments, follow my podcast, and tell your friends. Also, please follow the podcast page I've made on Facebook. If you'd like to contact me via email instead of a Facebook message, you can email me at corachin@mailbox.org. If you are new here, welcome. I'm your host, Cora, and I'm so excited to have you on this journey with me. Today, I want to talk about the benefits and drawbacks of adjusting our clocks for daylight savings time, as well as also discussing sleep. I chose the time change aspect of this topic because I just had to switch mine recently as I record this, and I'm sure that many of you in the United States also had to as well. With the sleep aspect of this episode, it just kind of ended up flowing naturally while talking about the time changes. Before I get into the episode, however, I just wanted to apologize for something really quick. For those who did not see my announcement on YouTube and Facebook a while ago, I ended up deciding to briefly take a break from releasing episodes so that I could have more time to make new ones. It's not that I don't care about releasing consistently or that the podcast doesn't matter to me anymore, though. I absolutely love doing the podcast, and I just needed some more time to make some new episodes, so I wasn't trying to rush and reduce the quality of my episodes as a result of trying to hurry. It was a much longer break than I was originally anticipating, but I'm glad to be getting back to making new episodes for you all now. Thank you for your patience during the time that I was not releasing new episodes. I really appreciate it, and I'm excited to see how the podcast continues to unfold from here. I also just want to add that this episode is not meant to be a serious or heavy episode. It's just for fun, and I want to simply share my opinions on this topic. If you feel differently on this subject than the opinions that I'm about to share, that's okay. We do not have to share the same opinions on things. I also wanted to add that I decided to make a special Facebook group for the podcast. I know I already have the Facebook page, but I thought it would be fun to have a group there, so then hopefully notifications will go out better when I post or when a new episode releases. One other quick thing I wanted to ask you all is if you have any topic ideas. Just reach out and let me know if you do. I will respond as I am able to, but I may not always be able to get to them right away. Anyway, with all of that out of the way now, let's go ahead and dive right into today's episode. As we start, I want to ask you a couple of questions. The questions are, do you like spring forward better or fall back better? The second question is, do you have time changes where you are? Where I am, we do have time changes. I think both time changes have good things about them as well as bad things. However, the biggest reason I like fall back is because we gain an hour of sleep. I don't like that it gets dark so early when we fall back, though. My biggest reason for liking spring forward is that the daylight lasts longer. However, with spring forward, the hard part for me is losing an hour of sleep. I think that whatever your reasons are for not liking either time change, your reasons are valid. I'm more of team fall back than team spring forward. Instead of asking the questions for you to vote on, I will put the team fall back and team spring forward in a poll for you all to vote on which one you like more. Now, let's get into talking about the benefits and drawbacks of spring forward and fall back. First, I will start with my benefits and downsides to fall back. Then, I will talk about spring forward. As I stated before, these are just my opinions that I will share, and you might have different opinions than I do, which is totally okay. The biggest benefit of fallback in my mind is gaining an hour of sleep. It's also pretty cool to see the leaves changing colors, too. I like that a lot. I'm not sure what my favorite fall color is. I think they are all good for different reasons. I also like to enjoy some of the typical fall treats, like apple cider, apple pie, donuts, and that kind of thing. I'm not really into pumpkin all that much, though, typically. I know other people like pumpkin, but my general preference for a flavor of fall food is apple. things like caramel apples, apple cider, donuts, pie, apple crisp, and those kind of things. A couple of the biggest downsides to fall back, in my mind, are the shorter hours of daylight and it's darker for longer. It also means that it starts to get colder outside. I don't like when it's cold outside. I mean, I guess there are some good parts to fall in winter when it is really cold, like having fires in a fireplace or drinking something hot, but I don't really like being cold. If it's only a little cold and not windy, then it might be okay, but it being really windy and cold at the same time is not as fun in my mind. The benefits of spring forward are that it starts to get warmer eventually, even if it is slow, more sun for longer, more time to sit outside, or to even go on walks, flowers and plants blooming again after winter, pretty spring colors from flowers blooming, not having to wear jackets as much some days, sometimes cooking outside, and having picnics. I also enjoy when we can do a cookout with friends. That is really fun too. We don't do that very often though, just every once in a while. The downsides of spring forward are losing an hour of sleep. Sometimes it can still be cold in early spring. Sometimes it can be very rainy, possible tornadoes, at least where I am, and sometimes, depending on timing, it can sometimes snow too. I know it's not really up to me, but my preference for months it should snow would probably be just December and January mainly. Maybe February too, but not as much. I know that the world doesn't work like that though. I'm just saying that's what I would pick if I could. Like I said before, this episode is just for fun and not necessarily meant to be heavy or serious. Another downside is that spring forward also means that it will slowly start to get hot for summer. Thankfully, that usually doesn't happen for at least a couple of months after spring forward, though. If you do have time changes where you are at, do you think they should go away or should they stay? I think it would be kind of confusing at first if they did go away, but it would also be nice to not have to change the clocks anymore. I'm not necessarily saying that I am completely against changing clocks, but I'm also not exactly completely for it either. As I said before, both time changes have benefits, and they also have drawbacks. If you could pick one to go away forever, what would it be and why? I'm not entirely sure which one I would pick. I like that it stays lighter longer with spring forward, but I also like the extra hour of sleep for fall back. If I could have benefits of both in just one, then I would probably pick fall back, but have it still be lighter for longer and also still get warmer. I know that probably sounds backwards or even silly, but I think that's probably what I would have to say at this point in time as I record this episode. One of the only drawbacks of spring forward in my mind is losing an hour of sleep. I know that's technically only one night that we lose an hour of sleep, but I don't like losing the extra hour. It's not perfect, and sometimes sleep amounts vary for me, as I'm sure it does for others as well, but sleep is a very important thing to prioritize every night. I know it's not always practical to sleep at night if you work a night shift or something like that though, so I guess, in that case, you could just sleep when you get off work if you are able and don't have much going on that day. Sleep deprivation is not fun though. It does happen sometimes, unfortunately. Even to me. I feel like I am generally more of a night owl than a morning person, but I can be a morning person if I absolutely have to be, and depending on how I slept the night before. Usually, once I'm awake for an early morning, I can be okay after a little bit, but sometimes I'm still really tired. I remember one season of my life where I had a couple of very early mornings every week. That season of my life only lasted, I think, a few months or so, but I enjoyed it. On the mornings I would get up early, it was to help with the tech for a couple of events my church did at that time. They still do both as of the recording of this episode, but at least one of them changed to a different format for meetings. After the events were over both days, I would go home and then try to go back to sleep for a little while, since I was usually still short on sleep from the night before and I was still tired. In some ways, I miss doing those events, but I don't necessarily miss the early morning aspect of them. With the one on Tuesday mornings, the main reason I was up earlier for it was that my current church, as of the recording of this episode, is 20 miles one way from my house, and my dad had a prayer group that he went to on Tuesday mornings before the women's Bible study would meet. Because of that factor, it was just easier for me to go with him for that, since it would have been a lot of extra driving for me to stay home during his prayer group and then go help with the women's Bible study, as that would have been 2 40-mile round trips. Plus, there wasn't enough time in between the two events for him to go to his thing, come back home to get me, and then get back to church in time without cutting it close. So, I usually just went with him to his group. Once his prayer group finished their meeting, he and I would go to the other event that I was helping with afterwards at one of the other campuses. I didn't hang out in the room his prayer group was in while I waited, though. I waited out in a hallway nearby. It wasn't a group my dad led, though. I think someone else was in charge of it at that time. With the other group on Friday mornings, it was a slightly earlier morning than when his prayer group met because there was some setup we needed to do for it. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please follow, leave a comment, and a review of my podcast if you haven't already, and please follow my podcast page on Facebook so you never miss an update. If you have any verses you'd like me to read on a future episode, or if you have any topics you'd like me to talk about, you can email me at corachin@mailbox.org, or you can send me a message on my podcast page on Facebook through the link in the show notes, and I will get back to you when I can. Hope you tune in next week for episode 58.